Landslides and mudslides, or mudflow, are fast-moving debris that has become liquefied by the addition of water. They can move at speeds ranging from 10 feet per minute to 17 feet per second. Volcanic activity, heavy rainfall, snowmelt, or high levels of groundwater flowing through cracked bedrock may trigger a movement of soil or sediments in landslides that continue as mudslides. A rockslide is differentiated as it is caused by rock failure, as part of the bedding plane fails and passes through compacted rock, while material collapses en masse. They are technically similar to an avalanche because they are both slides of debris. While a landslide occurs when loose dirt or sediment falls down a slope, a rockslide occurs only when solid rocks are transported downslope. The world's largest historic landslide occurred during the eruption of Mount St. Helens, in 1980, a volcano in the Cascade Mountain Range in the state of Washington, USA. It caused an earthquake that weakened the entire north face of the mountain to slide away, a sector collapse which was the largest subaerial landslide in recorded history. At the same time, snow, ice, and several entire glaciers on the volcano melted, forming a series of large volcanic mudslides that reached as far as the Columbia River, nearly 50 miles to the southwest. The landslide caused an explosion of gas-charged, partially molten rock and high-pressure steam. The resulting blast created another landslide consisting of very hot volcanic gases, ash and pumice formed from new lava, as well as pulverized old rock which hugged the ground. Initially moving about 220 miles per hour, then accelerated to 670, and briefly passed the speed of sound. The landslide temporarily displaced the waters of nearby Spirit Lake, in a giant wave about 600 feet high. This, in turn, created a 295 feet avalanche of debris consisting of the returning waters and thousands of uprooted trees and stumps. Some of these remained intact with roots, but most had been sheared off at the stump, seconds earlier by the blast of superheated volcanic gas and ash. The debris was transported, along with the water as it returned to its basin, raising the surface level of Spirit Lake by about 200 feet. Harry Truman lived near Mount St. Helens and refused to leave his home despite evacuation orders. He was killed by a pyroclastic flow that overtook his lodge and buried the site under 150 feet of volcanic debris. Truman was alone at his lodge with his 16 cats, and is presumed to have died of heat shock in less than a second, too quickly to register pain, before his body was nearly vaporized. In December 1999, torrential rains caused flash floods and debris flows in Vargas State, Venezuela, and killed tens of thousands of people, destroyed thousands of homes, and led to the complete collapse of the state's infrastructure. As much as 10% of the population of Vargas died during the event. According to relief workers, the neighborhood of Las Corrales was buried under 10 feet of mud, and a high percentage of homes were simply swept into the ocean. Adding to the devastation, Vargas State had experienced high population growth and development since a similar 1951 natural disaster, thus increasing the toll of casualties. Heavy rains fell in December 1999 along the north-central coast of Venezuela, culminating in a period of extreme intensity around 8 p.m. on December 15, when runoff entered channels and rushed towards the sea, picking up and depositing sediments on its way. The debris flows moved rapidly, and many of them were highly destructive. Geologists estimate the flow velocities to range from 11 to 48 feet per second. The front of the mudslide contained boulders and cobbles that would have crushed anyone in their path, while the slower parts were dotted by fine, sharp stones which caused lacerations. Of the many communities that were affected by the disaster, the Caraballo Fan was one of the most hard-hit, as it was heavily urbanized, with many high-rise buildings and multi-story houses. Approximately one-third of the community was inundated by debris flows. For the unfortunate residents who were not killed right away, the flow carried dirt that easily moved into open wounds, as well as other open body parts, the eyes, ears, and mouth, while thick mud placed pressure capable of inducing traumatic asphyxia in 1 or 2 minutes, upon people buried alive in it. 43-year-old Dania Milano and her family stayed awake for 3 nights straight, afraid that their house would be the next to be buried by the giant mudslides that kept crashing down the mountains. Finally, the family heard the tumultuous rush of cascading mud and debris approaching their house. Milano and her sister gathered their children and ran outside and down the hill to safety. When they turned around, they watched a wall of mud split their home in two. A Rottweiler named Orion was recognized for his role in rescuing people during the tragedy. The mudslide forced his owner, Mauricio Perez, to leave their home and go to a safer place. They came across a young girl trapped by turbulent water. The dog guided the girl to shore by swimming at her side, then jumped back in to pull a second girl out of the water. He then helped 8 children climb to high places. He spent Wednesday night and part of Thursday morning saving 37 people from drowning, ranging from a girl of 8 years old to an elderly man of 80. He was awarded the medal, Honor the Value, and a certificate for the role he played as a good boy. The disaster caused estimated damages of $70 million to $3.5 billion US. The death toll was considered to be between 10,000 and 30,000. The exact number of casualties is difficult to determine, as there is no reliable census data from the region, as there were many shanty towns and small communities that were completely wiped out. Moreover, only some 1,000 bodies were recovered, with the rest swept to sea by the mud or buried in the landslides. Looting and sacking occurred everywhere, forcing the military to implement martial law for more than a year. In November 1985, in nearby Colombia, the Armero volcanic tragedy occurred, following the eruption of the Nevado del Ruiz stratovolcano. As pyroclastic flows erupted from the volcano's crater, they melted the mountain's glaciers, sending for enormous volcanically induced mudflows, landslides, and debris flows. They swept down its slopes at 50 kilometers per hour, and picked up speed in gullies and engulfed the town of Armero, killing more than 20,000 of its almost 29,000 inhabitants. Casualties in other towns, particularly Chinchina, brought the overall death toll to 23,000. The event was a foreseeable catastrophe, and geologists and other experts warned authorities and media outlets about the danger in the weeks and days leading up to the eruption. Prior to the eruption, survivors in Armero described the night as quiet. Volcanic ash had been falling throughout the day, but residents were informed it was nothing to worry about. Local radio stations reported that residents should remain calm and ignore the material. One survivor reported going to the fire department, but he was dismissed and informed that the ash was only nothing. Just before 11:30 p.m., a loud roar could be heard from the mountain, and a huge stream of water swept through Armero. It was powerful enough to flip cars and pick up people, and quickly transformed into what is known as a lahar. An extreme version of a mudslide, lahars are exceptionally hot as they are made of volcanic rock fragments, gas, and ash. When the first lahar hit Armero, it virtually erased 3/4 of the town, and 28,700 inhabitants were killed. This lahar was 100 feet deep, moved 39 feet per second, and lasted 10 to 20 minutes. The second lahar lasted 30 minutes, and was followed by smaller pulses. By that point, 85% of Armero was enveloped in mud. Survivors described people holding onto debris from their homes in attempts to stay above the mud, with some of the deceased dangling on structural protrusions, while everything below their torso were completely gone. Buildings collapsed, crushing people and raining down debris. The explosion also ejected sulfur dioxide of about 700,000 metric tons, or about 2% of the mass of the erupted solid material, making the eruption unusually sulfur-rich. The eruption produced pyroclastic flows that melted summit glaciers and snow, generating for thick lahars, and destroying a small lake that was naturally created several months before the eruption. The lake's hot, acidic water significantly accelerated the melting of the ice. They ran down the volcano's sides at an average speed of 60 kilometers per hour, dislodging rock and destroying vegetation. After descending thousands of meters down the side of the volcano, the lahars followed the 6 river valleys, where they grew to almost 4 times their original volume. Many who survived the lahars succumbed to their injuries, as they were trapped, and either died of infection from 2nd and 3rd degree burns, or contracted hypothermia during the ensuing cold nights surrounded by water. Natural disasters are a dramatic example of people living in conflict with the environment. Because mudslides and landslides occur frequently, and soil-rich volcanic regions tend to attract high-density human development, it is imperative to have a good understanding on how to prevent them from occurring. Early predictions and warnings are essential for the reduction of property damage and ultimately, avoiding loss of life.